Good afternoon. Welcome to the News Roundup for Friday, September 19, 2025. It's Bill Thomas here with a number of intriguing stories to share with you today. And here's what's happening right now on the big Roundup. We begin with this. President Trump announcing plans for a series of high-stakes meetings with China's President Xi Jinping. Our country's Social Security program now admitting that all options are on the table to save the failing agency, including by raising the retirement age, and a well-known Democratic squad member now firmly setting her sights on a White House run in 2028. Say it isn't so. Also, the president eyeing a military return to Afghanistan, and an airplane in France forced to circle the runway for an hour simply because the air traffic controller was taking a power nap. All this and much more coming up right now on the big Roundup. We have a lot to get to today, and we begin with the leaders of the world's two largest economies finally agreeing to sit down and meet face-to-face in a series of desperately needed critical summits. President Trump now saying that he plans to get together with China's President Xi Jinping first at an economic summit, which is being held next month in South Korea, and that'll be followed by a trip to visit Xi in China at the beginning of next year. Trump says that the two leaders, they spoke personally by phone, that the call went very well, extraordinarily well, and that plans are also in the works for Xi to come to America sometime in the near future as well. The president says that during their conversation, both he and President Xi made significant progress on a number of critical issues, including trade, fentanyl, and the need to bring the devastating war between Russia and Ukraine to an immediate end. He also says that during their conversation, they both took a big step forward concerning Chinese approval of a deal regarding TikTok, which would allow the popular social media app to continue operating here in the U.S. That deal requiring the sale of the controlling stake of TikTok to either one or more American companies in order to avoid a U.S. ban. Now, to refresh your memory, U.S. officials have been worried about the wildly popular app because TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is required by law to hand over any requested personal data to the Chinese Communist regime. They're also highly concerned about the algorithm that determines which material that the app's users are able to see. Now, as a result, the Trump administration says that earlier this week, they reached a prospective framework agreement with Chinese officials concerning the sale of TikTok to a group of American firms. For their part, China says that during the conversation, Xi stressed the importance of the ties between our two nations, urging the U.S. not to impose any further trade restrictions and saying that both sides need to work together to create a win-win situation. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. So you know, this is not the first time a U.S. president has taken a meeting with the leader of China, and you may recall President Nixon's trip to that part of the planet way back in 1972, which ended 25 years of isolation between the U.S. and the People's Republic of China, the PRC. That visit also resulted in the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in 1979, and absolutely a major positive step forward. Today, it's almost like Donald Trump is taking a page out of the Nixon playbook, and here's the deal. U.S.-China trade relations, they are critical to both nations, and clearly, neither country benefits if we're not getting along well and on a variety of levels. Now, trade is paramount, but we also have to ensure that China is held accountable for fentanyl trafficking, human rights violations, and a variety of other very critical issues. It's also becoming abundantly clear that China, if they're willing, they can assist in bringing Russia's nearly 4-year-long war with Ukraine to an end. They can work with the U.S., Ukraine, all of our allies as well, and do what's right for the world by gently urging Vladimir Putin to end his brutal war. The relationship between China and the U.S. can be deeply complicated, but we've got to pull out all the stops, ensure that we're not adversaries with China, and do what's in the best interest of both of our countries and the entire world. Producer Davey checking in now from the Roundup Studios in Washington. We are wrapping up the week, Davey, in my estimation, with what sounds like some good news, a positive step forward for the world. Yes?
Well, Bill, talk is cheap and actions speak louder than words, so let's see how it all pans out.
I think actions are going to speak much louder than words, with 3 potential meetings in the works. You got the one in South Korea, the one in China, and one right here between our president and the president of China. Now, your thoughts and your comments on Trump and Xi, make a nice, drop us a note. And we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to the email bag. I think it's a big deal. And what are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, it is a big deal. And here's a view from Marion in Ozark, Arkansas.
Hello, Marion. State your business. What are you thinking?
Marion says, why does President Trump have to go on bended knee to Asia to meet with Xi? Why can't he come here?
Well, he's not going on bended knee. He's doing what the president of the United States of America, a global leader, does, trying to normalize relations with China, just like Dick Nixon did back in 1972. It's a positive step forward. We're going to meet first in South Korea. That's going to be a neutral position. Second in China. And if everything goes well, that third meeting right here in the U.S. You got that entirely wrong. He is not going to anybody on bended knee. The president of the United States is a top-notch global leader. Appreciate you checking in. I think you got it mildly wrong, but I appreciate you checking in. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's a view from Steve, who's writing to us today from Rapid City, South Dakota.
Bring it on, Steve. What do you think?
Steve says, I applaud President Trump for taking the initiative regarding TikTok and holding out an olive branch to China.
Sure.
However, I don't trust the communist regime, and I'm sure they have something up their sleeve.
Oh, they most likely do. Vladimir Putin always has something up his sleeve as well. But, it's like they said in the movie The Godfather. You ever see that little-known feature film, Davey, The Godfather with Al Pacino?
Yeah, I think I probably have watched it a time or two, Bill.
Yeah, from The Godfather. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And Donald Trump, he's wise to think that way. China is kind of an anomaly. They're both a friend and an enemy. It's in everyone's best interest if we're closer rather than farther away. The Trump administration working every imaginable angle to ensure that we all get along with China by meeting in South Korea, then China. And again, as we just mentioned moments ago, finally, we'll play host to President Xi right here in the U.S. We are doing what other folks are doing, and that essentially is creating alliance. Watch as Russia and Iran and North Korea and China create an alliance. Look, we can learn something from that. We got to create an alliance as well, first with China and then in time, hopefully with Russia, once that war comes to an end. All right, change things up just a bit now. Turn our attention to some enormous changes which could soon be heading our way to remedy the pressing issue of our nation's failing federal retirement program for U.S. seniors. Yeah, the SSA. The top dog at the Social Security Administration now saying that no stone will be left unturned when it comes to fixing the program, that they're currently weighing all their options and that they're seriously considered the possibility of raising the retirement age. It's possible. And right now, both the program's main trust funds are predicted to become insolvent in less than a decade, in large part due to the growing ratio of retirees to workers here in the U.S. As a result, the Social Security Commissioner now saying that future generations of Americans likely to have a whole new set of rules which are completely different from the ones that are currently in place. Also says there are a large number of changes which are currently under consideration, and among those options, raising payroll taxes or even lifting what they call the contribution cap, which limits how much of an individual salary is subject to Social Security taxation. The commissioner says right now he's working diligently with both the White House and a number of prominent cabinet members to figure out a way to both protect and preserve the Social Security program. Also says that eventually, when they've got it all figured out, Congress will have to become involved as well, adding that that's where the real work begins. Now, according to a recent study, 70% of younger Americans say they worry more about running out of money when they retire than they do about dying. That's a lot to take in. And final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Our nation's Social Security program is outdated, ill-conceived, horribly mismanaged, and as customers of the program, we should all be demanding more fair and appropriate service. When many of us began paying into the system, we were told that we'd receive full benefits at age 65. And somewhere along the way, they kind of changed the rules, up the retirement age as well. And to make things worse, they keep threatening to one day diminish our benefits, and by as much as 24%. Adding insult to injury, now they're talking about increasing our payroll taxes so that we'll pay more into the system while waiting longer to collect reduced benefits. Davey, this is absolutely the perfect crime. If this were happening in a business or a poorly run third world nation, we'd be pointing our fingers, laughing at that nation's bureaucracy, and ridiculing them for taking advantage of their citizens. Unfortunately, this is not happening somewhere overseas, some far-off land. It's happening right here in our own backyard, and in my estimation, it's entirely inexcusable. After decades of failed leadership, if the federal government can't fix the Social Security Administration, then hire someone who can. And think about farming out the program to our pals at Amazon. They seem to know full well how to run a business, turn a profit, and treat people fairly. Now, your thoughts and your comments on what I think is a broken system. Tell us what you're thinking. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, you're in charge of that sprawling email bag. Tons of notes are coming through. Who's up first?
Okay, Bill. First up, we've got Lloyd from Greenville, North Carolina.
Welcome to the program, Lloyd. What do you think?
And he says all this talk about Social Security is nonsense. In the end, it will be what it will be, and we'll take what we can get. And there's nothing we can do about it except cry in our soup.
It'll be what it'll be. It'll be broke if we don't do something about it real quick. And to make things even worse, and I don't know if everyone knows this, and with regard to the payroll tax, you pay that payroll tax into the Social Security Fund. They also tax a similar amount from your employer. So the government is essentially double dipping while telling you have to wait longer to get that money back that we promised you and at a lower rate. So this is beyond the perfect crime. I appreciate you checking in. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's a bit of a different view from Virgil, who's writing to us today from Houston, Texas.
Hello, Virgil. What do you think?
Virgil says, I worked all my life, and every week they took cash out of my check to pay for someone else's problem.
Yeah.
I darn well expect to get it back. Every red cent.
Yeah, I don't think you'll get every red cent. You might get some of that back, but not every red cent. It almost kind of feels like a pyramid scheme. And think about a bank doing something like this. Your bank, you deposit $50,000. They promise you a 5% annual interest rate. And then along the way, maybe they're not making money. They change the rules. Now they say, well, we're going to lower that to 2 or 2.5%. Hey, your bank would never get away with that. Neither should your federal government. We all have to demand more and demand it very, very rapidly. Switch things up now just a bit. Turn our focus to a well-known Democratic Socialist Congresswoman who's now eyeing a run for the White House in 2028. According to people familiar with the decision-making process, progressive squad member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Is she the one they call AOL, the computer lady, Davey?
No, Bill. Bill, it's AOC.
AOC, not AOL. Okay, AOC, the New York lady, now looking to step up in weight class and seek a higher office than the one she currently holds. Say that right now she and her team are debating whether she should run for either president of the USA or for the Senate, and that no matter what she ultimately decides, she's trying desperately to expand her profile from coast to coast and throughout her own Empire State in order to cover all of her bases. In case you missed it, earlier this summer, the 35-year-old Congresswoman, she joined fellow socialist Senator Bernie Sanders on his nationwide Fighting Oligarchy tour. Absolutely. I remember that very well. Also taking painstaking efforts to grow her social media presence while assembling a long list of potential donors who could potentially finance her grassroots campaign. Yep, for our nation's top post, Davey. And no, our top host is not News Roundup fill-in podcast host. She's talking about being the U.S. president. Go figure. In the meantime, her team is working diligently to provide her with all of her potential options. And with the election still a few years away, she has plenty of time to make up her mind. Now, some of her allies point out that she has a very broad support base, and they think that even if she doesn't truly believe she can win, and she can't, AOC would consider running for the Democratic nomination for president, simply so that her party's far left wing has a horse in the race. Meanwhile, if she chooses to run for the Senate, she'd likely be challenging current Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who was elected to a fifth term back in 2022, but he has not said whether or not he'll be planning to run again. So in case you're not familiar with AOC, some of her radical policy stances include advocating for universal health care, investing in clean energy economy, and abolishing ICE, immigration and customs enforcement. She also stands firmly against almost every one of President Trump's policies. And final thoughts, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. From time to time, truth is, in fact, stranger than fiction. And if this is what the Democratic-ish party wants to sell to America, have at it. And Davey, I'll be the first to congratulate future Vice President J.D. Vance on becoming President J.D. Vance. It'll be a done deal if he runs up against her. AOC has as much of a chance at scoring the nomination of her party to be the president of the United States as I have of becoming wealthier than Elon Musk, that smiling car maker. Now, with regard to one insider claiming that it's the height of arrogance to assume that she couldn't win the nomination in 2028, then call me arrogant, because that's never going to happen. You also might find it interesting that while AOC has a tendency to vilify the wealthy, she has no trouble at all doling out millions this year on growing her social media presence and obtaining a list of possible supporters and donors to raise those big bucks. You can't be wealthy, but her buds sure can. It's kind of fun to watch, but Democrats, they really need to be a grown-up in the room. They need a grown-up in the room to kind of lead the way effectively. Last time around, they offered up a timed-out Joe Biden, who was widely considered to be physically and mentally compromised. And in his stead, they then offered up the cackler-in-chief Kamala Harris. Two epic failures, and I'll tell you, if you run AOC, you're a party which simply refuses to learn brutally valuable lessons. Your thoughts and comments on a future President AOC. Drop us a note. We are at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, what are folks saying about this one?
People are wildly divided on AOC. Either you love her or you hate her, it seems like. So here's what they have to say.
Go.
George in Concord, New Hampshire.
Hello, George.
Says, let's get real. AOC has no shot of ever becoming president. She's a radical left lunatic whose policies are way out of touch with the average American.
Absolutely. I would run her for dog catcher in some small county in the Midwest, but president of the United States, this is more ludicrous than you could ever have imagined. And who's up next?
Okay, here's a different view from Sally in Peoria, Illinois.
What you got, Sal?
She says, our country needs way more people like Representative Ocasio-Cortez. She's a breath of fresh air who's not afraid to tell the truth, and we're going to need someone like her to wash away the stink of the current administration.
Hey, look, so this AOC, she's not the right person for the job. I'll tell you what, she already supports Mamdani, the socialist, in the New York mayoral race. More of that. She has tons of complaints about people whom she claims are wealthy, and her mission is to tax the rich. That's the one you want for your president, someone who says, you've got too much money, we're going to steal it from you and give to the poor. That's a tired old argument. She also criticized President Donald Trump. She calls him a union buster who would sell this country for $1 if it meant lining his own pockets. And clearly, this is not the person you want leading the USA. Her chance at the nomination, 0 in a billion. Although 0 is a whole number, so I guess that accounts for something. And with regard to beating up on the president, you may have forgotten, but when he was president first term, he donated his salary to charity. He's donated a good chunk of his current salary to charity as well. So he's not doing anything to line his pockets. He got it entirely backwards. All right, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. Speaking of President Trump, 47 pushing for our nation's military to regain control of what they call Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan from the Taliban, saying the move is necessary to reestablish an American presence in the region while keeping nearby China in check. China, we're watching you. Eyes. We see what you're up to. Also in Minneapolis, the star-studded Farm Aid fundraising concert celebrating its 40th anniversary. Another massive show on Saturday designed to raise public awareness of the challenges faced by American family farmers. The enormous gathering said to include 92-year-old Willie Nelson. Dave, is he really 92?
92 years young, Bill.
He doesn't look a day over 91. Who else will be there? John Mellencamp, Bob Dylan, and so many other big stars. Also on Sunday, the public memorial service for assassinated political activist Charlie Kirk set to take place at a football stadium. That'll be in Glendale, Arizona. Among the tens of thousands of expected attendees, a number of top administration officials, including the Secretary of State, the Vice President, and President Trump will be there as well. Turning now to the world of business and a quick peek at some developing stories which are making headlines today in finance, commerce, and so much more. A leading food industry analyst warning that due to rapidly rising grocery prices, Americans should brace themselves to face imminent shrinkflation, where prices, they stay the same, but the size of the portions, they're kind of reduced, blaming climate change, labor shortages, and tariffs for the problem. Also in California, the largest shopping mall in San Francisco now standing 93% vacant due to ridiculously high rents and rampant retail crime in the city by the Bay. That shopping center losing more than $1 billion in appraisal value in just the last 10 years. Davey, 93% vacant. What's left? Cinnabon? What else could be in there?
Well, I can't imagine what would want to be in there. if everything else was empty, Bill.
Sounds like a ghost town. When I was a kid, the mall was the place to be. And following a very short stay at the top, Oracle's Larry Ellison, no longer the world's richest man. Yeah, neither am I, thanks to fluctuations in the stock market. Elon Musk is once again the person with the most money in the entire world. His net worth now an astounding $480 billion. That's almost a $500 billion, man. And right now, it is time once again for the lighter side of news, where we flip the script and take a quick look at a few entertaining stories which are guaranteed to make you want to throw a lamp at my head. It happens. We kick things off today with a story that's a real wake-up call for anyone who's ever flown in an airplane. Davey, I have flown in an airplane. As you know, I'm a bit of a pilot and wondered why it takes so long to land. Well, a French airliner was recently forced to circle repeatedly over an hour before finally landing, simply because the air traffic controller. Davey, you think he was on a break?
I don't know, Bill. Was he on a break?
He was not on a break. He was actually asleep at the wheel. He was taking a nap. According to locals, the Airbus A320 jet, it was on its way from Paris to the island of Corsica before arriving an hour late, only to find the runway completely dark and the control tower failing to respond to their calls. No kidding. Eventually, police and fire officials stormed the tower, broke through the doors to find the lone controller snoozing away at his desk. They shook him awake, flicked on the lights, and the jet finally landed without any problems. Now, David, look, in defense of the air traffic controller, actually, there's no defense. Being an air traffic controller, it's a difficult and stressful job, but something that's also mildly complicated and at times a bit stressful. Yeah, piloting a big jet airliner, an Airbus A320. And here's the deal. When you're low on fuel and you got 285 passengers who want to get off the plane and start their holiday or maybe head home, it would help if the controller would maybe sip a cup of Joe or pull a Red Bull down his gullet so he could hear the pilot who's calling the tower and trying to get clearance to land. You know, as a general rule, when a pilot is looking for permission to touch down, they're met with either a clearance to come on in or a friendly voice telling them to circle for a little bit longer. The one thing you never want to hear from an air traffic controller, Davey, there's one thing you never want to hear. You know what that is?
What's that, Bill?
Snoring. Now then, Davey Cakes, it is time for our new Friday feature called Home of the Week. And who are we featuring this week?
Well, Bill, if you're going to start with a feature called Home of the Week, you might as well bring out the big guns, as they say.
The big guns, absolutely. Turn now to a story that deals with a popular Hollywood talk show host, and if you're interested in forking over your hard-earned dough for some prime California beachfront property, have we got a bargain for you. Check this out. Late-night legend Johnny Carson's sprawling former Malibu estate now hitting the open market once again, and the magnificent palace. It can be yours for the minimal asking price of a cool $110 million. Davey, I'm no real estate genius, but generally these things are mildly negotiable by $5 or $10 grand. Is that accurate?
I think, Bill, depending on who negotiates for you, but with you at the helm, you probably can make it work.
Make anything work. The secluded 7,100 square foot compound located on a high bluff overlooking the Pacific comes complete with a number of impressive features, including an indoor arboretum, a koi pond with a waterfall, and even its own personal tennis court. By the way, the couple that sell the property, they bought the place back in 2019 for only $40 million, meaning they're looking to score a hefty profit by flipping the estate after only 6 years. You know, there are tons of places all over the country where you can live somewhat affordably. And Malibu, California, it's not one of those places. If, however, you are a member of the privileged class and you happen to have an extra $110 million stashed away under your mattress, well, the former Carson estate might be a nice little starter home for you. Now, there are some negatives, and so, you know, Davey, in real estate, we call this full disclosure. Now, the home, it kind of sits on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. I don't know if we have any pictures. If we do, they'd be right over here over my shoulder. It's overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and the nonstop sound of those crashing waves down below might be mildly annoying. They might keep you up at night. Also, maintaining the pool, the spa, the tennis court, it's an extra expense. So you have to take that into consideration. And because the house has more than 7,000 square feet, yeah, you'll need to purchase one of those industrial-sized, real loud vacuum cleaners. Exactly. Another big expense. Owning a home, it ain't easy. It ain't cheap. Now then, Producer Davey, I'm going to bargain with you for one more story. Make it count. The weekend is upon us. And what do you got for us?
Okay, Bill. You know, there's lots of people out there that just love shopping, right?
I love shopping.
Okay, for anybody who loves shopping, we've got a story for you.
Engineer Jamie enjoys shopping as well. Finally today, a story for the lost and the found. I am often lost. I am seldom found. And anyone who's a big fan of Mickey Mouse, Pluto, Goofy, and all the rest, listen up. The annual Disneyland Lost and Found sale set to kick off on Saturday at a Goodwill store in Orange County, California, not too far from Disneyland in Anaheim, featuring thousands of unclaimed items which have been dropped and long forgotten by the millions of visitors who paid a recent visit to the popular amusement park. Some of the treasures which you can get your hands on if you're lucky enough to attend the sale include those goofy Disney ears, the hats, the dolls, the stuffed animals, and all the rest. And even better, everything you stuff into your shopping cart is going to be sold at, check this out, 90% or more off those ridiculous original retail prices you find at the Disneyland stores. So they're pretty much giving it away. Now, as one of the perks of the gig, Disneyland employees get first crack at the goods before the doors swing open to the general public at 11 a.m. And then the furious stampede begins. Get out the way. I want my bargains. By the way, all proceeds go to Goodwill. That's where the sale's going to be. So apparently it's all for a very good cause. Now, Davey, as you know, there are a few things in life that I enjoy more than 90% off. And when Disney swag is involved, I am all in. And for me, it doesn't even matter what you score. Glasses, hats, sweaters, toys, junk, doesn't matter. As long as that Disney logo is somehow attached and the discount kicks in, I'm golden. And the best part is, on top of the discount, all the money goes to Goodwill, and they are, of course, a very worthwhile charity. By the way, in the next couple of weeks, if you see some Disney merch for sale on eBay at a brutally low price, it'll most likely come from someone who went to this weekend's big Disney sale. And now, if we could somehow score some of those 90% off Disney theme park passes, Davey, life would be grand. And that is a look at the lighter side of life. Holler if you have any thoughts or comments, questions, or complaints. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, any thoughts for the weekend? What are folks saying?
Okay, Bill, we'll head to the mailbag here, and we'll start with Sly from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Sly as in the Family Stone, or Sly as in the Sly Guy? Sly Stallone. What's Sly have to say?
Sly says, with that air traffic guy, I don't see the big deal. We've all taken a nap at work at one time or other. Cut the guy a break.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I take a nap here, take a nap there. But the bottom line is that's an air traffic controller. You got to be alert and awake and on the job at all times. On the other hand, with regard to the pilot, if that airport is not responding, there's some kind of an issue, it's required of you as the pilot in command of that aircraft to have an alternate airport in mind where you can go in the event of any contingency. So to sit there and circle for an hour and wait for that airport controller to communicate with you doesn't sound too bright. I would have gone to the alternate location. I appreciate you checking in. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Wendy in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Wendy, what are you thinking?
Wendy says, I live in Nebraska, and my lifelong dream has been to visit Disneyland, not some garage sale. We have Goodwill here.
Yeah, listen, Disneyland is a great adventure, very pricey, and a lot of folks, when they go there, they spend a boatload of dough. They've got stores all over that theme park. That's where the big bucks are. Trinkets that are probably made overseas costing Disney, I don't know, $1.25, $1.50. Retail, $18, $20, $30. The clothes are even higher. So hey, people want a bargain. If you can get Disney swag for 90% or more off, tons and tons of people go to those sales. I've never been to one, but I know they do it every year, and it's a big deal. Time for one more, Davey, then we wrap it up and make our way into that weekend.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Elliot in New Mexico.
What you got, Elliot?
Elliot says, thanks for telling me about Johnny Carson's house.
Yeah.
I can barely afford to pay rent, and you're rubbing it in my face.
Yeah, $110 million for a crib. But I'll tell you, I've seen pictures of that house. It's one of the most extraordinary, beautiful homes I've ever seen. I've been in aircraft and I've circled over the home in Malibu, an area they call Point Doom, and it's quite a sight to see from the air right there on the Pacific Ocean. But the pictures, now that we've seen the interior and the exterior of the grounds, I've never seen a more beautiful home than that former Carson estate. No one can afford $110 million except maybe Mr. Ellison or Mr. Musk and a couple of others. But if you got the dough, that is the place to live, and to live large. And now time for us to call it a wrap on the Aloha Friday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these words of wisdom, they come to us today from a guy called Irving Berlin, who said, Life is 10% what you make it and 90% how you take it. Very profound. Berlin was a Russian-born American composer and songwriter. During his lifetime, he received a number of prestigious honors, including an Academy Award and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And some of his well-known hits include Putting on the Ritz, White Christmas, There's No Business Like Show Business, and all the rest. And we can't forget Berlin's other big hit, Davey, Take My Breath Away. Remember that from the 80s?
Well, Bill, you're half right. I believe that was a band called Berlin, but I don't think they have any relationship to Irving Berlin.
Oh, a different Berlin. I had no idea. And now it is time for us to bust out for the weekend. But before we do, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. Chip in, for crying out loud. Simply subscribe to the program. That's all you have to do. And that way you never miss a single episode. For now, it looks like our time, officially up. Have an awesome day today. Enjoy your weekend as well. Please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And now for my dear friend, Engineer Jamie, please dim the lights. Let's fade to black. And we'll see you right back here on Monday afternoon.